Welcome to iPad Pros, the show all about using your iPad to be more productive and get work done. I'm Tim Chatton, host of the show.
I believe that the intimacy of that with a stylus and with really good swipe keyboards and with really good anti-reflectivity are going to be when everyone from factory workers to upper level management really adopts this thing as the form factor for getting a lot of work done. It's really going to come into its own. So instead of seeing my use cases quirky, I believe that those are going to be important changes to be made to have a bigger crew of people coming on board and using it comfortably.
Well, welcome back to another episode of iPad Pros. Thanks for joining me today. I'm excited today to share with you an interview I did with Tom Snyder, writer, developer, and musician. You'll hear about his recent switch to iPad only and some deep dives on some lesser known apps. But first, let me just remind you that I'd really appreciate a review of iPad Pros in the Apple Podcasts app or iTunes on the Mac or Windows. Please head over to Apple Podcasts to leave a review. I would greatly appreciate it. And with that said, here's my interview with Tom. Enjoy. I'm here today with Tom Snyder. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Tim.
You as well. So first off, can you just introduce yourself to listeners? Who are you? What do you do for a living? All that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm Tom Snyder. I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm a geek with. I've had a lot of careers under my belt, all of which I still do. But I started a bunch of companies at different times in my life and have sold them and continued to do the same work, just without the company behind me.
Gotcha. And what kind of work have you been involved in and are currently using technology to help solve problems with?
Well, going all the way back, not all the way back to the Earth cooling 3 billion years ago, but I started out, I was a recording artist with Capitol Records, and so I learned a lot of studio chops there, and I played in a band on the road. And then I started a software company, and we made educational simulations for schools, and we did that back in the 80s. And that company grew up to be about 170 people, and I sold that. And then I started an animation company where we made comedy TV for network TV, all animation. And that was my company. I did all the writing, music, and scripts and stuff for those shows. And we did well. And I sold that show. That company. Sold a lot of shows, but sold that company. And now I'm a book writer and magazine writer and podcast guest. I don't have a podcast of my own, but I'm a professional podcast guest. I forget how much I'm making for this podcast.
All of our podcasts are pro bono.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Once I start making money on the podcast, I'll let you know.
Yeah, I get it.
So during all those years developing software, recording, you have, of course, used technology, and today you're using iPads, or the iPad Pro, I should say, to get your work done. Making the switch, I think it was when the iPad Pro came out, is that right? Or iOS 11, excuse me.
I made as a matter of fact, when the iPad first came out, I forget the first year.
It was 2010.
2010, and everybody was buying them, and I just hated it. I really did hate the iPad then because it seemed like such a consumer machine, and all the executives I knew, all my friends who were executives, had them and said they lived on them, and I realized that's because they didn't do anything. They emailed their secretaries. They created nothing.
You got that wonderful keyboard dock back then.
Yeah, right. But it was.
To your point, it was a much different device back then.
I think very wealthy executives liked them because it was cool, and I think also people who like shopping and stuff like them. And I tried really hard to play. And then when iOS 11 came out, I went out and got an iPad Pro, the 9.7, and then made a commitment. I said, damn it, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to go I'm going to do the long game on this. And I have a iMac with 27-inch screen and a MacBook, which I thought were cool, but none of them were as cool as my iPad. And since I've bought the 12.9-inch iPad as well.
And you'll use both, or did you get rid of the 9.7?
I have both, and it's all I can do not to get the 10.5, only because I'm looking for the perfect size for everything.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
I'm a sort of. It's funny. I worked with a comedian, Jonathan Katz, who I made a TV show with, and for years we've had this joke, that our slogan is "one man, one device," and that we haven't perfected our lives until we have one device that does everything. And certainly that was the laptop for a while for me, and now I'm trying to make that one device be the iPad. So I'm really going out of my way not to, to never give up and go to the computer at all. Or I shouldn't say the computer, I should say the Mac.
Yeah.
The iPad certainly is a computer.
So on the Mac, what applications were you relying on there, and what kind of iOS apps have you found to replace those?
I guess there are two categories. One big one is sort of organization, and the other big one is making.
Yeah.
And forgive my French. I will clean up for your podcast. Back, when Microsoft was first introducing their tablet computers, I don't know if you were playing with computers back then, in around 2000. And they had some really good tablet computers with stylus. They were heavy.
Oh, yeah. I've seen them. I've not used them.
Yeah. And I had made an attempt to have them be my primary device, too. But when they first came out, Bill Gates had also released OneNote, which was a very powerful tool in Windows for organize. It was sort of Evernote on steroids, very powerful in Windows. And then they made a version of it for Mac, which was about 50% of the functionality. And I switched over to that and have used that for a long time. And then recently I've been, playing, well, not recently, over the last 5 years, I guess. I've been playing with Workflowy and OmniFocus, and Workflow is cool. You got to hand it to those guys for making the simplest damn interface that anyone ever made that just plain works. I don't know if you've played with that at all.
Yeah, it's mind blowing. I don't normally play around with web APIs, but the Workflow app encouraged me to do so, and I now schedule like social media posts through an API that HubSpot has through Workflow. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. And I tried OmniFocus, and I am not a fan of their methodology. I think they're too happy with their very unusual set of systems for controlling the way one lives. I find it just too complex by half.
Yeah, if you read the Getting Things Done book, it is that. So if you're not into that, that's what it is.
Yeah. Although I really love the GTD, all that stuff. I think it's fascinating to think about being systems oriented in almost everything you do, including your life.
Yeah, and the review process is really helpful if you do that like once a week and hit that review button and see what is in there.
Yeah, are you an OmniFocus?
I am.
Is that?
Yep. I definitely use it. I've gone in and out of how in depth I do with the organization that they have in there versus more simple organization.
Yeah. Well, maybe I should try something else. Sometimes I just go back to, I'm like all of the many crazy people who spend more time thinking about organization than actually getting organized. Wunderlist I've tried, and it's plain vanilla, but it does the trick. So there are times when I think, well, enough is enough, and I'll just do that. So that's organization for me. I'm sort of all over the map now because I've been playing with a lot of tools. I will try OmniFocus again, because if a bright young guy like you can make it work for him, I'll try it again. So I wrote I did a show called Dr. Katz, which was on Comedy Central, and I did a show called Home Movies, which was on a Cartoon Network, and then a show called Science Court, which was on ABC. My job was writing the shows and also doing all the audio. So we would bring in comedians, it was all done here in my house in Cambridge, but I'd bring in comedians from all around the country and do the audio editing. And so the tools I used on the Mac were everything from Pro Tools, which is sort of the de facto audio editing software. And by the way, audio editing for doing comedy or scripted shows is so different than doing using Pro Tools for music, where everything is parallel and stays in sync with itself. But if you have 10 different tracks, each with a different actor, all of whom are talking to each other, it requires a lot of really sophisticated playing with the editing software. And so, and finally, I moved to a program called Reaper, which is kind of like the Google was to Microsoft back in the day. It's just a bunch of guys who made a program every bit as good as Pro Tools that costs like $25 or $30,
Right.
and
Yep.
And downloads in seconds, as opposed to what it used to take to get Pro Tools on your computer.
Oh yeah,
And
I remember the days I worked in a computer lab. We installed Final Cut Pro, whatever 7. It was like over 5 discs. So you had to like swap in between the discs as the installer would go through.
Yes, and invariably on disc 6 of 7, it said, "Can you start again?"
Yes.
And often, even if you just spent $400 or whatever it was, you get, "No, I will not start again. I'll do anything but start again." But I'm now hoping to find something for iOS that does a good job with. I don't know how familiar you are with audio editing.
I mean, that's my day job is podcasting, so I do a lot of audio. I like Ferrite is my go-to tool. I'm not sure if you've looked at that and if that is
What's
it's called
it called?
Ferrite.
Ferrite. Is that iOS?
It is, yeah.
And does it have non-destructive editing?
It does, yeah. So as you edit and cut stuff up, you can then go back and extend it so the original audio is there if you need to get back to it.
Right. So it's actually just pointers to files.
Exactly. Yep.
Oh, that's fantastic! I can hang up right now. You've solved all of my problems.
Yeah, for people that use Logic, it's just as advanced as that, is what I've heard. But $20.
Ferrite.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. I feel like I've just had 2 cups of coffee.
Yeah, it's a fantastic tool.
So that really is my main, workaday tool, because no matter what I'm doing music for the shows I'm doing now, or editing voice performances, that's what I do a lot of. And then I do a lot of writing too. So there's the whole question of
do you use
writing apps?
Yeah, multiple writing apps for different purposes?
I do. Again, I am obsessive. I actually have a diagnosis from my doctor, which I can mail to you if you don't believe that I'm obsessive. But this one man, one tool thing, which is ridiculous, because multiple tools. Ask any carpenter. You want multiple tools, but I'm always looking for the one thing that is just so beautifully crafted that it's a multi-tool. For long form stuff, for novels and that sort of thing, or technical books, I gave Scrivener a shot, and it's a little bit too proprietary in format.
Mm-hmm.
So you start getting anxiety when you're having trouble loading your file, and you realize that you have to get in touch with Scrivener for them to help you get the file back into your. I don't want to knock.
Yeah. I used their Mac app in college and enjoyed what it was, but it was proprietary.
Yes,
yeah.
and
Evernote's even more so proprietary.
I know. Evernote, I just raise. I can't believe that they have this powerful company and they're a lot of income, and they're not, improving their lot. But the new branch of software like Ulysses and Bear, and those things that are all just doing Markdown and allow you to save in a variety of formats is preferable to me. But given the fact that the writing I do is very expressive, because it's either comedic or, even sitcoms, they're love stories, the voice has to be really good. And I have this incredibly cool app, and I just wrote to them today. Have you heard of VoiceStream?
I have not, no.
Okay, so VoiceStream is an app for iOS that will read text. It's text to speech.
Okay.
And it is really good. And if you're willing to drop some money, the app isn't that expensive, but you can buy voices, you can rehearse or audition voices and then download them onto your iPad or and I have found some just spectacular voices that read with such naturalness. It's incredible. So I was playing with VoiceStream to have it read back my text, and then I saw they had a program called Writer. It's Writer by VoiceStream, and it's funny. It's kind of hard to find on the App Store. If you just put in Writer, it almost doesn't show up. And what it is a tool for writers so that as you write, it instantly can and either automatically or by choice read as much of the paragraph you've just written or whatever. And I know you'd say, well, you can kind of do that in iOS anyway, just with turning on the voice to text thing. But it doesn't compare to what this writer gives you, and it has a built-in thesaurus that's incredibly powerful for writers. It even has a rhyming dictionary, which is good for me because I'm a songwriter as well. But then it has a really nice, in addition to the speech engine, manipulating of sections of your text, whether it be chapters or sub-chapters or whatever. It does a really nice job of that with a panel on the left that lets you look at things at the section level, at the paragraph level, sub-paragraph level, and you can manipulate them and move them around very quickly. And it's funny, I wrote to them when I first found it, and I said, please don't die. Don't go away, because I just love you. And I never heard back from them. So I wrote back to them today, again, before I came on your podcast, to say, are you guys alive? Because I want to promote your product. And I got an email back saying, there are just two of us. They're right here in my hometown of Cambridge.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
And I want to go find them. But I cannot highly enough recommend it for people who write prose where they need to hear a gorgeous British woman talking to them at 2 a.m, when they're writing and reading back your text and it makes you a much, much better writer, to be getting that. So that's one.
Yeah, they've got a suite for $20 that comes with the reader, the writer, and a US voice pack for $20. Also seeing they have an email application for if you need voice with email. I'm not sure.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, and so I cannot. They did. To suddenly just bang out a writing app, because obviously the speech engine is primarily what they're all about. But just banging out this writing app, they did a really good job of making a useful tool. So as much as I am tempted to use Ulysses and Bear with my longer format stuff, I still am using Writer.
Now, can I ask you, Final Draft Mobile, have you dabbled in that? I know Final Draft is one of the gold standards, like a Logic, for instance, in the screenwriting realm. Is that something you've played around with, or?
Well, I used Final Draft for years because you had to submit scripts to networks, in Final Draft. That was was always Windows. It was always Windows Final Draft too, because that was all they had. Yeah, so I knew that format and used it. I thought that Final Draft only had a reader. I didn't realize they had a writer now.
I believe it's Writer now. You may have to pay the upgrade fee, but I believe it also writes now. I'm not positive.
Yes,
but yeah.
Well, Final Draft is very good for scripted dialogue where it will format your speaker and then your stage direction or your slugs, all the different lines that go in for standard TV scripting. It's great because it'll give you standard. You go to pick a template, and it will ask you what you're writing. Right down to, I'm writing half-hour, comedy, sitcom, animated, and for each one, it puts up a different format that on average gives you 1 page per minute, which is very useful.
Yeah. Now you mentioned music was a part of what you dabble in as well for work.
Yeah.
What's your end goal? You're creating original music to be played with the animation. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Well, for all the animated shows, I wrote the music, and now I've got a variety of projects going on now. One of which I'm just finishing up, which is a musical comedy that you might see on stage. And so I write the songs. Oh, I sound like Barry Manilow. I write the songs that make the whole world sing. But I have a recording studio right here at home with the instruments, and so I haven't, every once in a while for composing. Um, I think that was your question. Software for composing music, is that?
Yeah, you mentioned you had real instruments, so you don't use like the electronic performance you could do on an iPad with like a MIDI. You could hook up like a MIDI keyboard to the iPad, stuff like
Yes,
that.
yes. Well, I have a Kurzweil keyboard upstairs in my studio that is both MIDI and it's got some great built-in sounds. But every once in a while, especially because of this iPad commitment I've made, and even back with the Macintosh, it's fun to use a program like Band in a Box or something that lets you very quickly speculate on a new song with chords and melody that just takes seconds to sort of find the style you want to work in, and you put in the chords. So you just put C minor sharp. Have you played with any of those tools, such as Band in a
A
Box?
bit,
Yeah.
yeah, but not as much. I'm more into just composing with me writing stuff out in Notion's my preferred app for that. It used to be Finale Music, but that never
So
made
you
the
could,
transition.
and so you write in musical notation
I do,
itself.
yeah. I was a composition major, and that's kind of my background.
Ah,
Yeah.
that's great. I was, I was more taught the sort of jazz style of learning chord notation with everything in Roman numerals.
Yeah.
You're kind of independent of key, and so you learn chords first, and then you learn melody after the fact. But I like tools like that. I really am about to go on a death march of finding everything out about the iPad that will let me compose in different modalities. Everything from um, MIDI to very simple little tools. I tried GarageBand, and everything I make in GarageBand sounds like GarageBand somehow. I
Right.
don't
Yeah.
know. Um, and no matter how unique I try to be, and that's probably my fault because I haven't explored enough downloading samples of other instruments, etc. One of the reasons, as an aside, that, starting a long time ago, and this was a habit I developed in college, my fourth week in college, I didn't even know there was a student center. And I went to the student center, and from that point on, I wrote everything. I did all my homework and I did all my writing at the student center where there's rock and roll playing in the background and eating hamburgers and
Mhm.
jukebox. And since then, everything from software to TV to books, I've written everything in bars and cafes long before there was Starbucks, and it was kind of hip to be,
Right. Yeah.
doing all your, that's sort of the new standard. But this is one of the reasons the iPad is really fun because instead of sitting upright at a bar stool um, with your iPad and your arms properly locked for keyboard typing, I love the iPad for that sort of intimacy. It reminds me of the legal pad that I used to use. There's sort of a romantic association with the pencil and the
Hmm.
legal pad.
Yeah.
And jumping, well, I'm all over the place. You'll excuse me for the kind of guest I am, but
No, it's all right.
the from a hardware perspective or a software perspective, I hear a lot of people talk about the various keyboards that you can attach to your iPad and how cool they are. But part of me, since I'm using the touch screen so intimately with the iPad, because of that kind of relationship I have to the iPad, one of the things, my favorite keyboard is the Gboard, the Google's keyboard that replaces the built-in keyboard,
Yeah.
the software keyboard, and which has the swipe feature. And it's better than swipe because it's using Google's engine to predict misspellings and words much better. But uh, when I went out and got the 12.9-inch iPad, which I think we should call the
Right.
13-inch iPad, when it's in landscape mode and you've got two apps up at once, which is a great convenience that iOS brought us. When you put the keypad up, it is 13 inches wide. And if you're using the swipe mode, because you're up close and touching a lot of stuff on the screen and you're writing text, suddenly you're swiping the length of a 13-inch keyboard.
It's a good workout, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of a workout than you want, because after a while with that swipe stuff, I'm faster than I
Yeah.
could ever type on a regular keyboard, and it's very good swiping with a stylus too.
Oh yeah.
And
Hmm.
and as far as I can tell, no one has made a software keyboard that you can size and make shorter horizontally as well
No,
as
that's not a thing. You can split. You
vertically.
can split the keyboard. I think is the most that's there.
Yeah, but that's incredibly important to me. I have found uh, because I'm sort of hesitating from using the add-on keyboards, because that gets to be the problem that the Windows convertible computers had. The hybrid computers where it was both a tablet and a keyboard. And it's sort of odd to be reaching across your keyboard, across the desk to touch the screen to do certain things.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the smart keyboard. I mean, it's right next. They don't have a function row to bring your hand closer to the screen. I also like
Yeah,
the fact that you have the full screen space because the keyboard's not taking up space there. But
yeah,
yeah,
I agree. That's the other thing. I'd want a smaller software keyboard, so it took up less of the real estate on the screen.
yeah. Now coding. What kind of software development can you do on iOS? I know there's not Xcode, but there are other things you can do, right?
There are, and I may not be the ultimate authority on what's available in terms of code, but I think I was telling you in the email I sent you, I've started working on a project with some guys from Harvard Ed School who are building some simulation, and I came onto their team because of my background doing that, and I was, I was right in the middle of my commitment to working on the iPad, and so I was looking for, well, to start with, we were going to not write code at first. We were just going to use a prototyping language, of which there are many on the Mac, but none of them were powerful enough to build. A lot of the prototyping software tends just to be wireframes and push buttons that sort of mocks up what the program will look like, but it
Sure.
doesn't do
Hmm.
any behavior. And I was thinking that's just not enough for quick prototyping where you can do testing with students, et cetera. So I went on a search and found out that basically it's built into iOS that you can't program on
Right. Yep.
it. I hadn't understood that. And I guess because they don't want people getting down into the monitor, or that's an old-fashioned term for
But
coding. But
I think the main thing is they don't want people bypassing the app store. And if you could develop apps, you could then send apps to another person and run it in a different app, kind of thing.
I guess, yeah, maybe it's as simple as that.
Yeah, and I think they'll eventually solve that. I think there will be Xcode on iPad one day, and I think they will figure out a solution for that.
That'll
That's
be cool. But since I have spent the last 6 months doing more coding than I've done since I was in my 20s. So I went on a search for something I could code with the iPad. And also the iPad was going to be what the games were played on. So I thought that would be cool, because I always found if I programmed on the computer, we used to have big Contron monitors to program for the IBM PC and the Apple, early days Apple computer, et cetera. And it wasn't as good as programming in the very screen that the games were going to be played on, because you could test it very quickly.
sure. Yep.
I know there's simulators, but so I went on a hunt and couldn't find anything except the original BASIC language that microcomputers used to be sold with, like the Apple and the IBM PC. It's a very high level language. By high level, I'm not meaning sophisticated, but keeping you away from the machine, meaning of high level. But there's a BASIC written by some German guys called Smart Basic that I found that works on the iPad. And the way they get around the coding problem is, or the programming on the iPad, is if you write code for it and you send it and you try to upload it on your iPad, you have to remove the TXT button.
Yeah.
I mean, extension.
Yep.
And once you do that, you can save offline. You can save your backup the code you're writing for this interpreter they have on the iPad, and get. It's a very powerful little language. Even though it's basic, you can call functions, do function calls, and there are global and local variables, and I found I was able to do everything, almost everything I needed to do. Certainly not as elegantly as if you could use Xcode and Swift or
Yeah.
some of the other
What's
languages
this
they
one
had.
called again?
It's Smart Basic, I believe, one word,
Okay.
and it's hilarious because it's written it's written by a German, and I will share with you that I mean it really is fantastic. But when you go to get support and help online, it looks, you can choose between German and English, and there's a lot more in German than in English. So you have to kind of wrestle a little bit. But there's a user community that's quite vocal, and they'll help you with, discovering commands you didn't even know about. So I don't know. I just found it incredibly useful. And Basic is a language you can pick up sort of in a day,
Yeah.
you know,
No,
compared
it's
to others.
one of the original languages, right?
Yeah, it was written, I think, at Yale or Dartmouth back in the 70s.
Right. Yeah. I know one of the developers I'm following on Twitter is working on like an Xcode for iPad that uses a Mac as like a server it will tie into to do some of the things limited by it. So that is a project underway by third parties. If Apple doesn't get around to it, there's clever developers that are trying to do it.
Yes, that's encouraging.
Yeah, I was going to ask, any other kind of more hidden gem apps that you use outside of the voice-driven writing app and the development app?
Well, I would say that I'm sure you're aware of this app, but Dragon Anywhere.
Oh yeah, fantastic for dictation.
Have you played with Dragon Anywhere?
It's been a while. I did have Dragon for Mac back in the day, which was a fun thing where you had to train it and all that good stuff.
Yeah. I have long been interested in that because I remember visiting the first company that was here in Cambridge that was doing voice recognition software back in the early 90s that was going to take a run at it. And so I've been devoted to following them. And I had Dragon for the Windows machines and then for the Mac. I always found it awkward, the way it worked with the operating systems on the computers. But Dragon Anywhere is just spectacular. Not just the taking dictation, but the commands that you can give it and manipulating the text and correcting errors.
Is it a standalone app or is it do they have a keyboard extension now? What is the full feature set of it?
It is a standalone app and a text box that you're writing into, and then a button where you can quickly copy that text and paste it into whatever document you're going into. But it's a pretty nice writing environment, on its own. So at first I thought I'd be speaking my text, copying and pasting all the time. But I find, I might do 15 pages of a novel or a script or something right in the Dragon Anywhere text editor and then copying it over. And it's constantly backing it up to Dropbox as you speak. And
that's
so
nice.
You feel very confident, but it also has great commands. So you can say, go to beginning, correct that word, select from yesterday to the word Tim, and it, selects all that. And it's very good at knowing the difference between your dictate. I don't know how it does it. It's almost tone of voice or something.
Yeah.
But I find it to be so incredibly fast and better, in fact, than the iOS versions. And I think that might be because the iOS doesn't get in the way as much when you're trying to use it in concert with another program.
Sure. Yeah, I believe it. I mean, that's what they do. That is their whole company of dictation, and it should be good. Something I'm wondering is with your kind of work environment, is it kind of like you're on the phone? I mean, is it ever weird talking in a bar and reading, writing your script that way?
Well, with the new, what are these very earbuds I'm wearing? I can never remember.
The AirPods.
AirPods. For some reason, that's the only name that doesn't pop to mind every time because it doesn't have anything to do with ear.
No, they already have the earpods. This is
right.
the AirPods. Yeah.
The ones that ship. Yeah. I mean, that don't ship, but should ship with the iPhone 10.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But I put one of those on in a bar, over in the corner, and even if there's music playing, and they're always when I come in, they start playing Beatles music automatically. I'm such an old customer for them. As a matter of fact, it's an ex-employee of mine in Harvard Square who started this bar restaurant that I work in. The whole staff, all the waiters and waitresses are part of my staff there. But I drop in this earbud, and it's extremely good. So probably other patrons of the restaurant think I'm insane and talking to myself, but it just works.
Yeah.
It works extremely well for me. So between that and using the swipe function, and by the way, of course, in the Dragon Anywhere, anytime you want, you can bring up your keyboard to work in concert with Dragon Anywhere. If there's a kind of correction you want to do, or a kind of text expander pasting or anything like that. So
yeah,
it's the combination of that swipe and just talking is the future to me. I think that is going to be the best future interface.
It'll help with arthritis and repeated stress injury for sure.
Yeah, have you developed any?
I can definitely feel I type too much, and
yeah, the thumb is the first thing to go.
Yeah, and I do play some video games as well, so it all contributes. I'm aware of it.
Yeah, that's true.
So, the smart keyboard, is that something you own, or I'm more curious about? Do you have a stand or a case of any kind? How do you work with the iPad as far as the transport and all that? I've
tried so many cases, and I have that. I don't know what it's called, but the thing that you can buy right at, I think it's an Apple product that is just the cover.
Sure, the smart cover.
Yeah, the smart cover. Mm-hmm. My favorite keyboard is I forget who it's. I don't have it right in front of me, but it's just a Bluetooth keyboard that's separate and very thin, and I just throw that in my backpack. And if I absolutely need a keyboard for something, especially for coding situations where occasionally you want a keyboard, I will use this Bluetooth keyboard that's actually separate from the, it doesn't attach in any way to the iPad, which is being supported by its own cover. And I find that's good because I sort of set it off to one side, and I'm much closer to being able to touch the keyboard and manipulate things. But I'm trying to use the keyboard as little as possible, simply because I'm a futurist.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that this is the interface of the future is going to be voice and touch.
Yeah, one of my favorite keyboards is by Logitech. It's got
that's it.
It's able to hot swap between 3 devices, so I work on the 10.5 and 12.9 all day long, so I'm able to use the one keyboard, just hit a button, it's on the other one, and it's even paired to my phone, so if I want to type on my phone, I'm able to just hit a button and I'm typing on the phone, which is nice.
That is the keyboard I was referring to that I have upstairs, the Logitech one. It's
Yeah.
very good and very thin, and it's a very soft touch.
It is, yeah.
I think it's very good. Speaking of hardware sizes and modalities, I have the 9.7 and the 12.9, and it's kind of a Goldilocks thing. I'm thinking the 10.5 is going to be my screen.
It's a great size. I definitely love the 12.9 for a lot of use cases where I'm sitting down at a desk. I want the biggest screen, and side-by-side apps are biggest. But the 10.5, it is very light, and it is perfect size for a lot of situations.
There's something about being on a plane or sitting in a cafe where the 12.9 is a little bit too much of a statement in front of you. Having all that light shining back on your face. And the 10.5 is the sweet spot, I think it's going to be.
Do you use cellular data for your iPads?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I figured it'd be mobile. You definitely would, right? Yeah.
I immediately put in the card. I use Verizon in this area, which tends to be very good. Yeah, I live on that. And I tend to go ahead and, because my income is so based on what I do on the iPad, I spring for not having to worry about data.
Yeah. No, I understand it. iOS 13, what do you want to see in iOS 13 that would help solve some interface issues and I guess multitasking. And if, are there any frustrations with 11 or 12 that you want solved the next time around?
Listening to your podcast and other iPod, what's the one with Sparky?
Oh, Mac Power users?
Mac Power users.
Yep.
Yeah, there seems to be a general consensus out there that the iCloud is now ready for prime time.
I'd say so, yeah.
Yeah, I don't quite find it to be that.
Yeah, I saw that in the email, and yeah, I'm curious because it seems pretty instant for me.
I find it a little bit harder to move files around. This is, of course, with the Files program on the iOS, but to name files, no, to create folders and swap things around from one folder to another, it just doesn't seem that intuitive.
Yeah, I mean, drag and drop is the interface for moving stuff around for me, and if you tap and hold on something, you can rename something. Another thing that's not maybe the most intuitive is once you open the app, you can scroll upwards, and then you'll see a little create folder icon and sorting and some different things there. So yeah, there are a lot of hidden things, like the contextual menus enable you to do a lot of things, including sharing a file with somebody. Yeah, there are a lot of hidden things about it.
Are you sort of, some software comes with built-in Dropbox or Google Drive stuff, so you're kind of forced to be across several different environments. On my one-man, one-tool thing, I'd like to be in one environment, and I've tried to make iOS work, and that's an ongoing project with iOS 13, hoping the file manipulation gets a little bit more potent.
And is external drive support something you care at all about for what you do?
Not so much. I've been dumping everything onto the cloud for so long now.
Yeah.
That, I don't even own external drives. I know it sounds horrible, but I'm backed up 6 ways from Sundays, so that, I mean, virtually every site would have to go down for me to be in trouble.
Right, yep.
And, I haven't been using Workflow yet, although, I've downloaded it.
Yeah, the Siri shortcuts are intriguing. Is there anything out of there that you would see yourself using? Because you're a big voice guy, so Siri shortcuts seems like
it's going to be fantastic. Have you downloaded 12?
Yeah, I'm on the beta with my phone and my 10.5 inch iPad. I'm on the beta, so I am.
And that doesn't have the Siri shortcuts yet, does it?
It does. It doesn't have the shortcuts app, but you're able to make Siri shortcuts out of the more basic things.
Right.
If it hooks into like Spotlight, stuff like that, the previous API, you're able to do stuff with it.
Yeah. Well, I'd be interested if your listeners have run into this. When I first got started with the iPad for Sirius, I was going to use as many native apps as possible because it seemed like that was a safe bet. And so I was going to play with reminders and notes as a way of getting rid of a lot of the other, to-do list kinds of things and note-keeping apps that we've already talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But I was very disappointed that reminders and notes didn't really talk to each other very well. They weren't very well integrated.
No, they're not at all, no.
And that seemed like such an obvious thing to do for two administrative tasks that everybody has. They remind themselves of stuff and they make notes about stuff. And I just couldn't believe it. And then for me, and I know you wrote to me that this has not been the case for you, but I found that if, I'm working in notes and I do a lot of good stuff, and then I happen to turn on my phone, if I'm working on the iPad, things can get out of sync where my phone and my iPad are never aligned unless and I've gone online and found a lot of people who say this is true for them, and they say, yeah, simply just erase all your notes and relaunch, reload notes.
Yeah, very simple, right? Yeah. So this happens when you're looking at notes on two devices at once. Is that the use case?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I haven't tried that in particular.
Even if I'm not doing that on purpose, consciously, it can happen just because you open your phone for a second and it goes into notes. And it can get out of sync, which is... that's a 1993 problem that I can't, believe they haven't solved. And there are enough people on the web who are complaining about it and saying that the workaround is to simply reinstall one of them. And so I'm hoping for a really robust relationship in between the native apps, As a matter of fact, I think they had to take reminders and notes and make them all one program.
Yeah, if they can do it without adding complexity, I'm all for it. That's the challenge.
Yeah.
Notes is already a bit complex with the drawing and the scan a document thing. Like it's becoming a little bit of an iTunes on the Mac situation.
I guess that's true. If I was 21 again, what I'd go into is making the one tool that does everything with an incredibly sleek iOS. And I know everyone's. Oh, we had talked a bit about what's that app? It's got the same name as your notation app, Notion. Did you have a chance to play with that at all?
A little bit. I'm still trying to wrap my head around where I'd use it. It does. I mean, it tries to do a lot of notes and to-do lists and all that.
Yes, and I just hats off to them. They're so diligently trying to be this one tool, kind of like we're talking about reminders and notes on iOS combining. There are a lot of designers out there who know that that's going to be it. That's when you do a really good job of having your archiving and your to-dos all in the same place. So you don't split it up in your mind and say, well, I've got to do this tomorrow, and I will look in this other place to find all the notes I've written about that, historically.
I think this idea will really take off when I think we've heard in iOS 13 they're going to add multi-window support for applications and tabbed applications where you can have an email app and open a new window of that email app, and it's also a note app. And if there's multi-window support, I think that idea will become much more easy to be realized, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Were you disappointed with 12, or was it?
I'm thrilled with it. I'm not thrilled with the iPhone 10 gesture makeover, especially Control Center. But overall, I'm thrilled. My SE feels like a brand new phone. I'm really eager to see this iPad Pro in like 4 years if I still have this one. And the improvements in 12, I think, will make big payoffs later down the line for iPads where they won't age as fast, because I think the same technology will be able to be implemented for future OSs, and it'll make all devices going forward just not age as poorly, which is great. And I'm already seeing that with my older phone, so that part's really exciting.
That's true from an industry growth and sustainability point of view. That's key. I rarely think about it. I'm always trying to solve my most recent problem.
Yeah, and the group FaceTime seems really great, and one day I'll have that camera that does the Animoji, and I think from a content creator standpoint, I could see YouTube channels and people making a living off of creating YouTube shows with Animoji and Memoji and all that. I think that could be a thing that becomes a revenue source for some people.
That's interesting. Yeah, when iOS 12 info started bleeding across the internet, I at first was so disappointed because it seemed like that's all they wanted to talk about with iOS 12 was, more emojis. And I was thinking, God, is that what we've waited a year for?
There's just a lot of nice tweaks that I'm finding really, really useful.
Oh, well, maybe I'll go ahead and do. So is iOS 12 available for anybody, or do you have to be in a program?
The public beta is now out, and it works great. The only app I found that doesn't really work with it is Skype, so I have my 12.9-inch iPad for Skype still, and yeah.
I'm going to do that immediately, and
wonderful. Yeah, you'll find the gestures a lot more uniform for sure between your 10 and this. Yeah. Well, the final thing I want to ask is any form factors that you hope to see in the future, either a larger iPad or like a laptop kind of iPad. I know keyboards aren't the way of the future, but any like form factor changes or size changes you'd like to see in the future for iPad?
We had a company back in 2010 when the iPad first came out, and we were writing software for teachers to use the iPad with, to be a very smart teacher device. And back then, there weren't, third-party markets hadn't developed the kind of thing we want. So we started developing our own sort of hand holder back for the iPad. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had some.
So it's sort of like a glove, that your hand fits into. So the iPad fits really comfortably.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like you're walking around with a catcher's mitt on.
Right.
And,
yeah.
That was the only form factor idea I ever had. Right now, for all the iPad people like me who work in many different locations, from outside to in pubs to in cafes, I've been experimenting with different anti-glare screens that will lie on top of my iPad, because it's pretty bad, to
Are
work
you on
outside.
the second generation 12.9 or the first?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure because I know that's improved a bit with the latest
in
generation.
terms of glare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's still there
most
for
people
sure.
A lot of people don't have the same problem, because if it's propped up in keyboard position, it's sort of looking back at you, so it's not looking at the sky or the lights that are overhead. But if you have it more like a tablet, where you're writing it like a legal pad, it's looking right up at the lights, and it is virtually unreadable.
Yeah, that's something I hadn't considered.
And a paradigm that people were talking about, 10 years ago, with the advent of trying to consolidate TV and the internet, was the lean forward, lean back modalities. That the computer was sort of a lean forward thing because you were sitting at a proper posture to the keyboard, or you were leaning back, which you did when you watched TV. And it sort of was a good division in the business for talking about writing for those different postures that people had, because you have a different attitude toward what you're doing. And there's this kind of third one that I've been sort of implying all along, that is the sort of hunching over your writing pad.
Yeah.
Which is neither sort of the very square position to the iPad of the keyboard use, or the sitting back and watching TV. And for that, I believe that the intimacy of that with a stylus, and with really good swipe keyboards, and with really good anti-reflectivity, are going to be when everyone from factory workers to upper level management really adopts this thing as the form factor for getting a lot of work done. It's really going to come into its own. So instead of seeing my use cases quirky, I believe that those are going to be important changes to be made.
Oh, I agree.
Have a bigger crew of people coming on board and using it comfortably. Because, and I heard a term of art for it, unlike the lean forward, lean back thing. I heard the one bun writing, which means you're crossing your leg.
Oh yeah,
as you do, and sitting forward and developing a very comfortable posture toward your output.
Right.
And now you look more like Albert Einstein, at a cafe in 1912. With 16 cups of coffee in you and inventing relativity. It's an extremely productive way to work that I think the computer isn't quite getting at.
Yeah. No, yeah, the flexibility is amazing. I love being able to just grab the screen and tear it away from the keyboard, and and also the flexibility of, I want the screen vertical right now so I can be proofreading this document. That makes more sense that way, and it's in my hand and all that good stuff.
Yes. What is the least intrusive iPad cover that lets you set it up vertically and horizontally at will?
Ooh.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah. I don't have a good answer for that one. I can get back to you on that one.
Yeah.
I have a larger stand at work that 12 South makes. It's the Ghost stand designed for MacBooks. It's not very portable, but it's got this nice grippy surface and kind of elevates it a little bit. And I'll put my iPad on there, either vertical or horizontal, and it kind of gives me a little bit better posture when I'm just working on the screen itself. But again, that's more of a home use product, I'd say. Yeah, I'll have to look into that. Anything else you want to share before we end the show here?
Well, the only other thing I have to offer now are great one-liners from my TV show. So go online and watch Dr. Katz on YouTube.
Okay, we'll do. Any websites you'd like to plug or anything else?
I have plenty of websites that are my own, but I'm not going to plug them because I like how pure this is, just talking about hardware, software, and getting things done. So I'll make it less of an advertisement and more of a workman-like relationship.
Sounds good.
It's fun.
Yeah. It's been a blast chatting with you, Tom. Thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you, Tim.
Thanks for listening to iPad Pros. We'll be back in a couple weeks for another episode. Thanks again to Tom for his time today, speaking with me about all these wonderful topics. And just a reminder, if you could head on over to the Apple Podcast app and leave a review for iPad Pros, that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next time.